In this video, we're going to start moving towards an answer to the question, what is exegesis? We're not necessarily going to give one single definitive definition for what exegesis is, though one definition will be presented from Michael Gorman, but we're going to sort of introduce and think about the different aspects of exegesis and also introduce the sort of overarching method that we're going to be using throughout this course. That is to say, the hermeneutical circle, engaging the three different worlds of the text. But to begin the video, I want to start with a lecture pause. So you may have, if you've taken a class with me before, you are familiar with lecture pauses. If you watch the welcome video or the video syllabus, you're also familiar with lecture pauses because I asked you to start a file or get a notebook for lecture pauses. And one of the things that this is something we'll do in the class regularly, and it's a way to get you engaging lecture videos and for me not to just be giving you information. I don't primarily or only think about these lecture videos as a place where I am giving you content. I am going to be doing that in these videos. I am going to be presenting information, but I also think of them as ways for us to engage content together. And one of my sort of core principles as a teacher is that the more that you can be doing the things, the more that you can be actively engaged in your thinking and in your learning, the more you are going to learn. And one of the ways that you can be actively engaged in thinking and learning is by doing things, by writing, by making predictions, and by summarizing the content that I have delivered in these videos. So that's what we're going to do in this first lecture pause. Is you're going to make a prediction. You may have no idea what the word exegesis means. If you don't, that's totally okay. We're going to talk about it in this video and throughout the course. And some of you may have experience with exegesis and you may have practiced exegesis before. Whether you're the first person or the second person, whether you have no experience with exegesis, don't know what it means, or whether you have experiences doing exegesis, I want you to try and boil down in a single sentence or predict in a single sentence what exegesis is before I give you information about what exegesis is. And what this will do is it'll sort of help us, it'll give you ways to think, give you sort of hooks to latch onto as I present new information about exegesis. Science of teaching and learning tells us that the more that we can make predictions about things and either have those predictions confirmed or corrected, the more likely we are to hold on to that piece of information. So pause the video here, either in that file, if you prefer to type up your reflections, or handwriting in a notebook. Answer in one single sentence how you would define exegesis. All right, let's move towards me giving you some of my thoughts on what exegesis is. So etymologically, the word exegesis comes from the Greek word exegeomai. So if you're in the Greek version of the class, you may see some parts of this word that look familiar to you. If you are in the English exegesis version and you've never taken Greek before, that's okay. What we have up here, your lack of knowledge of Greek is not going to hinder you. This verb is made up of two different words. The preposition ek, which means out of or away from, and ago, which means I lead. So when we put them together, it means I lead out or to lead out. Sort of more colloquially, it means to tell, report, or describe, or to expound. So when we see this word actually used in the New Testament, we see it in a place like John 1:18, which says, "No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known." So John 1:18 uses this verb exegeomai in the aorist tense right here, the aorist middle, has made him known, has drawn him out, has expounded, has reported, has described the Father. So etymologically, exegesis comes from ek and ago, meaning lead out, leading out, meaning from a text. And so to get a sort of a short, punchy definition from Michael J. Gorman. He calls exegesis, or defines exegesis as the careful historical, literary, and theological analysis of a text. And what we'll see is sort of these line up with our different worlds of the text. So we're going to talk about in just a moment here the world behind the text, which would sort of line up with the historical analysis of the text, the world of the text, which lines up with the literary analysis of a text, and the world in front of the text, which lines up with the theological analysis of a text. And I would say that the world in front of the text is going to also do more than theology. It's going to be about one's individuality as well, one's social location. So really what exegesis comes down to is leading out meaning. So if exegeomai means I lead out, leading out meaning from a text, and in our case, a text of the New Testament, and leading out meaning through close readings. So the idea that you are doing a close reading, engaging the historical, literary, engaging in historical, literary, and theological analysis in order to understand what a text meant and what a text continues to mean. And this is a little bit different from the term hermeneutics, which you'll often see sort of thrown around with exegesis. And hermeneutics relates to how a text means, or how humans make meaning of a text. So we can think of hermeneutics sort of as a larger sphere in which exegesis is a part of. So hermeneutics is going to be really interested in how meaning is made, whereas exegesis is sort of the process of making that meaning by doing analysis of a text. So we could say that meaning is the object of exegesis, understanding or interpretation of a text in order to know what it meant and what it continues to mean and what it's meant through history is sort of the aim or the goal of exegesis. And this begs the question, where does meaning lie? So this is a question of both exegesis and hermeneutics. And there's sort of three potential candidates. And spoiler alert, the answer is that it's going to be within all three of these. The first option is with the author, the person writing the text itself. The second is with the text as it stands. And the third is with the person who is engaging or reading the text. And there's a danger in sort of overemphasizing just one of these three. So if you think of meaning as only in the author's mind, the one who wrote the text, and sort of classically conceived, this has often been what interpreters have tried to have the meaning they've tried to draw out from a text throughout the history of biblical interpretation is the author's intent, thinking about what the author meant when they wrote the text 2,000 years ago. The problem with this is that this is going to be impossible to recover insofar as those authors are all 2,000 years dead. So that we can't crawl back into John's head. We can't crawl back into Paul's head and figure out what was meant. So perhaps then the meaning is actually just in the text itself, the artifact that that author created. The problem with this approach, or focusing too much only on meaning being in the text, is that a text doesn't exist without an author creating it or without a reader engaging it. So that the text is sort of, if it's just lying there not doing anything, it can't have meaning without being engaged. So then our last option is that the meaning lies up here in my own mind as I engage the text. And the sort of risk of overemphasizing my own self being the locus of meaning is that I run the risk of not allowing the author and the text to also guide the meaning, that then the text can sort of just mean whatever I want it to mean, which can be a really dangerous thing for a number of different reasons, especially when it comes to texts that we consider authoritative as scripture. So to move from sort of where meaning lies to give us some different ideas or different metaphors for what exegesis is. And this is so that we're not boiling exegesis down into one simple thing. Exegesis, we can think of exegesis as an art. If exegesis is sort of the process of leading meaning out of a text by engaging the author, the author's world, the text itself, and myself, myself as the reader. Exegesis, there's an art to balancing those different places we are engaging meaning. Exegesis is also an art insofar as we're creating something. When we do interpretation, we're making something, and hopefully we're making something that is compelling and beautiful and draws other people in. Exegesis can also be considered an art insofar as it takes work and practice, and it takes different tools, and it must be learned from people that have done it before. The best artists have been proteges of someone else, and they learn the skills and the different tools that they're going to bring into creating different things as artists. There's also a sense in which exegesis is a science. While artists have tools, scientists also have tools. They're using their tools to come to conclusions about different things, and there's a method to science. Whereas art doesn't always have a method to it. We can say exegesis is like science insofar as there is a method by which we can do exegesis. And that method can be flexible, just as in different modes of science. The method of doing science is flexible. So also with exegesis, we're going to learn some of the different methods for doing exegesis and learn how to use them in different ways at different times. Exegesis is also a theological act insofar as we are engaging Christian scripture. We're engaging a text that we hold to be authoritative in some form or fashion. So that as we engage the text, we're engaging in a theological act. There's also a way in which exegesis is always communal, insofar as even when I'm reading the Bible on my own, I'm engaging the thought of another human being, namely the thought that was written in the biblical text itself, which we take as Christians to be also inspired and authoritative because of its sort of divine nature as well. So there's that communal sense, but also the sense in which when we are doing exegesis, when we're engaging scripture, we're usually doing it in different communities, whether it be the seminary community or the church community, the local church community, or the universal church community. The exegesis is always a part of engaging other people. And while it's also engaging other people, there is something individualized about exegesis, that much of the exegesis that you're going to be doing this semester is you sitting with the text on your own and sort of bringing your thoughts into the community. So there's a way in which exegesis is both individual and communal at the same time. And it's something that's ongoing, that your take on a passage the first time you read it, the first time you study it, may change. Over the course of the semester, you're going to find perhaps that whatever passage you choose, your thoughts on that passage and your understanding of it changes from the beginning of the semester to the end of the semester, and may change again after the semester ends. And the last thing that I want to emphasize is that exegesis is not necessarily neutral. There's sometimes a temptation to think of exegesis as sort of this objective thing, especially if we think of it as a science, that there's a temptation to think, I can just set myself aside, all my preconceptions aside, engage the text, and come to objective meaning that sort of just that I can present there without any biases. And I want to emphasize that that is not the case. That anytime we are doing interpretation of Scripture, we're bringing ourselves to the interpretation of Scripture. We're bringing our communities to the interpretation of Scripture. And that's a good thing. That's something that should be celebrated. That just as God speaks through Scripture, God speaks through the people of God, through the communities that are informing us and the experiences that are informing us. So I want to hear that sort of as a celebration of your past experiences, who you are as a person, and the communities that you bring into the act of interpretation. So to get down to sort of how we're going to be thinking about and how we're going to be actually practicing exegesis at the level of doing things, of completing assignments and writing an exegesis paper by the end of the semester. The sort of most common way to think about exegesis as a heuristic that you'll is what's called the hermeneutical circle. And the hermeneutical circle engages three different worlds of the text: the world behind the text, the world of the text, and the world in front of the text. And the reason it's called the hermeneutical circle is because you can sort of start at any point in this circle by starting by reflecting on the different aspects of the text, and then move to the next one, and then move to the next one, and continue sort of going around the circle. That as you engage aspects of each one of these worlds, it's going to change the way that you think about aspects of a different world. And sort of because exegesis is ongoing, you continue to go around in the circle and make new understandings and new meanings out of a given passage. So in a way, everything that we're going to do in this course sort of engages this hermeneutical circle, or is building skills so that you can engage the hermeneutical circle. And what we'll see here is that these different bullet points are different aspects of those different worlds. So we'll starting with the world in front of the text. The world in front of the text is you as the reader, and everything else that sort of from the text to your reading of it. So one of the things that we'll find as we do readings in this class is that authors celebrate their own social identities when they come to the reading of the text. So you should be aware of who you are as a reader and what you bring to the reading of the text. But the world in front of the text is not just about us as individuals, but also how the text has been received and used throughout history. So the world in front of the text is those things that come after the text, the different interpretations that come after the text. And also we can think of the world in front of the text as different reading approaches, as different perspectives that we bring to the text, whether that be theologically or literarily, as well as reading technologies. The medium in which you engage a text, whether it's digitally or in print copy, changes the way that you think about the text. So the text is sort of embedded in a medium. Whatever biblical text one might be engaging, Revelation or Romans, is embedded in another format or another medium. And the way that the format is engaged, or the technology is engaged, changes the experience of reading. When we come to the world behind the text, we're really thinking historically and culturally. We're thinking about things like who the author is, who they're writing to, when it was written, what was going on at the time it was written, what are the cultural and social phenomena that are sort of embedded into the text, where was the text written, where was it written to, and how does knowing these things, how does knowing more about these things help us understand what is actually in the text itself when we get to reading the actual text and the elements of it. You can think of the world of the text as really engaging the passage or engaging the text in a close reading, paying attention to particular literary elements that are in it, whether that be repetitions, parallels, words the author has chosen, text that they embed or they quote. Also think about the literary context. Where does the passage stand in relationship to other passages in the book? What comes right before it? What comes right after it? What comes before and after those in the larger context? And also, where is the text situated in the context of the canon as a whole within the New Testament itself? How does it relate to other New Testament texts? So these are all elements of the text. We would say these are sort of the literary features that we engage when we engage the world of the text in the hermeneutical circle. So again, when we're engaging these different worlds, it's not as though we move into one world and then when we're done with it, we never come back to it. The hermeneutical circle is called such because you sort of continue to go around engaging these different worlds and bringing meaning out of the text. So now that I've talked at you for about 17 minutes or so here, I want you to return to that single sentence that you wrote at the beginning of the video in the lecture pause and do it again. Now that you've heard me give you some information, give you different metaphors about what exegesis is and how we go about the process of exegesis, go ahead and pause the video and then we'll come back. I'm going to wrap us up after you do this. And in one single sentence, write down how you would define exegesis given everything that I have just told you. All right, so to summarize, exegesis is about leading meaning out of a text through close readings, engaging the text closely as to its history, as to its theology, as to its literary context, and as to what you bring to the text. And so meaning isn't found in one of those single places. It's found in sort of the conglomeration of all of them, the world behind the text, the world of the text, and the world in front of the text. And as such, exegesis is best done with a method that helps us draw out meaning. And the method that we're going to use for this class is engaging these different worlds, using these three different worlds as sort of heuristics to be able to think about certain things that are going on behind the text, that are going on in the text itself, and that are going on in front of the text. And sort of when we bring these worlds together, we can sort of bring out the meaning of the text in our own context, as well as in the historical context in which the text was first written.